today and just talk a little bit about them and show you some different styles on different items. So you can see here I've got several different things made, like mugs. I've got a soup bowl, and I've got like a batter bowl. These are some kind of more problematic shapes for handles. And then I've got some pitchers back here, and I've got over here kind of a casserole and a jug. So we'll just work on those. So I think that while I'm getting started here, I'm just want to mention a few things about handles. That the important thing about a handle is that it makes the piece more useful, and so you want it to be comfortable. And in order for the piece to be comfortable with the handle, you want to think a little bit about how you attach it and the shape and things like that. Every piece of pottery has kind of a center of gravity. If you imagine, you know, a line going down the middle and then an intersecting line coming about where your handle would be from the center of that down to the other side, that's kind of your center of gravity. So to make a piece comfortable to use, especially a larger piece or jug, you want your handle to be as close as possible to that center of gravity. So here's your center of gravity, so your handle needs to be as close as possible to that. So you don't want it coming way out here, because that's going to make it awkward to use, especially a larger piece. Imagine trying to pick up a pound of clay with a ruler that's 12 inches long. It makes the job a lot harder because it seems a lot heavier because you're so far away from the center of the weight. It's the same principle with your handle. And another thing that you want to think about for handles is that they work best if they're kind of flat and rounded on the edge. So you got a good flat area for your finger to control it. If the handle is round, it makes it difficult to grasp, and the piece can kind of twist around in your hand. So a nice flat area for your hand to grab is the thing. All right, so I'm going to start with this mug, and I'm just going to show you how a couple different types of handles will look. So I've got two types of handles. This is a strap handle that's preformed, okay? And then I've got a handle I'm going to pull off of the piece here. You can see how they will look different. We'll start with the strap handle. It's the type that's a little simpler. So, and look at my proportion of the handle to the piece, okay? It's not too thin, it's not too thin, and it's not too wide. So you want it to visibly look like it's going to support the weight of the piece. If it's too thin, then it doesn't look right or feel right. And if it's too thick, it can kind of overwhelm the piece. Now from a strap handle, I've gone ahead and I've scratched here. You can see that when I cut it off, after I pulled it, I cut it kind of at an angle, okay? So I'm going to lay that angle right against the mug, like that, and then smooth that on. See if everybody can kind of see that there. Now when I shape the handle, see how I have this nice contour and angle here as where the handle lifts off the piece. I want to preserve that nice angle. So I'm going to hold my finger under and then bend the handle around and then attach it down here at the widest part, just like that. And I'll finish, make sure it's straight. And then attach here. And then you can see your curve of your handle. And work that down a little bit more. And how that works. So you can see that it's not too far out, still gives you room to put your fingers in there. And it's attached to your good, so it's going to support the weight of the piece in a nice balanced way.
How wet is the clay at that point with the handle and the?
So this is just like coming out of the bag clay here.
Okay.
And when you're making your handles, it's important to kind of keep them, to not make them too thin, because if they're too thin, then they're not going to hold that shape. And and they're not gonna, you know, do well with your piece either. But if you like it, if you're having trouble with it, you know, holding the shape, of course, you can let it stiffen somewhat, you know, once you pulled your handle before you put it on. That'll help. Another thing you can do is to use some newspaper to help support the shape. Let's see if I've got a piece here. I can just demonstrate real quick. So you can take a strip of newspaper, and if you wet that, and then kind of get the excess water off, and then by doing like this, if your handle is not holding its shape, you can use the newspaper like that to help support it. It'll hold it until the handle stiffens. You want to take this newspaper off before it starts to dry too much, but sometimes it can pull the shape out of round. All right, so here's the same mug. I'm going to put a different style of handle in this. Now these I've already trimmed the bottoms and everything, both of them. So this one I'm going to pull off of the mug. So I'm going to attach it up here a little higher on the neck. Now I've got my handle started here. Let me pull one of these so you can see, but you can see it's just a started handle. So those are just pull off of a piece of clay. You can see how I've got a piece of clay that's nice and tapered all around. And as I'm pulling the handle, I want to keep that tapered. And I'm using my thumbs. I pull down the middle, down the sides like that. And I'll do the same on the other side. Down the side and down the middle. Taper it this way as well. Coming in this way. And here. Now before it's too thin, I'm going to cut it off there, just flat, just like that. Now I've got a flat place just like that. So what I'm going to do to attach it is I'm going to just kind of push that down and make a flange. So you're just kind of supporting the handle here, and I'm pushing that down with my finger, like so. Pushing in. And that makes it kind of flare out. Just like that. So an important thing when you're doing this type of handle is that you want it to be thicker at the attachment and then tapering down to the end. If it's too thin, if you don't have that taper, then it looks weak on the piece, and it can make a point of stress also, which can cause trouble later. All right, so now that I've got that flange worked out really well, I'm going to just push that onto the mug. I'm just really pushing that on back and forth, making sure it's good and attached. And then I'll work my join, working that seam good. And one thing I usually do is use a brush that's kind of stiff, and then I just kind of use that too to help smooth that out. Especially when you have this where you can't get your finger in there, your brush will kind of fit. All right, so now that's what I've got so far. So now I'm going to pull that off of the piece. So I'll hold it out to the side, and then I'll just pull it. And I'm going to start pulling with my thumb on the back side because I want it to kind of come up just a little bit towards the rim. So I'm just going to push that way, and then I'll do down each side, like so, in the middle. And I'll flip it over and I'll do this side a little bit as well. Same thing. But see how I'm coming off at an angle like this. So I'm working in that direction, not straight off the piece for this particular shape. You know, if your mug is coming straight up, then you're going to come more straight off of the piece. So with this rounded shape, I want to kind of get a little lift out of it. Like so. All right. So now that's what I've got. Nice tapered in every direction. And then I'll just kind of grasp my handle down here and kind of look it over. Make sure I'm straight. And then I can shape my handle like I want here. And if it's too much space in here, then I can pinch it off, move it down a little bit. Okay, so that's it. Finish here. Now, let's see, let's move on to our soup mug, and then I'll come back to this probably in a minute. Put that aside. So the soup mug shape, or in the, we'll talk about this batter bowl too, they're a little bit wider at the top, and then the bottom is narrower. So it's easy to get a handle that comes out way too far. So you really have to be careful with this type of shape. But I would do the same thing with this as with that, just to pull my handle a little bit starting here, and then come around like that. And so what I can do is take this, there's probably a little bit too big for this now, and I'll cut it off a little shorter, maybe about here. Same thing. Make my flange. And then I'll attach it. And I had made some of these, and I had attached the handle here at the top of the rim, and then come around like this. And I was noticing last night I was using one, and it was really uncomfortable the way that the handle was on there. And I had some other ones that I had made in a little different way, and the handle was a lot better. And I'm going to do this one in the better way. And it's similar to that mug shape. Just going to work it on there. Work this part with my brush inside here. And then pull it in the same way. Starting at the back, down the middle, each side, like so. And then the front. And then I come around, making sure it's straight, come around like that. And then I can shape it from here and push that up a little more. And this is going to allow that to really distribute the weight. This is a handle that you can use with one finger. And then your other finger is going to rest here on this part. Turn around this way. So my other finger will rest here as I'm using the piece. Well, anyway, kind of like that. So that gives you, a good control of the bowl with the handle with your fingers. Whereas if this is coming out too round, you can it's going to be harder, more difficult to control in that way. Okay, so let's take a look at our batter bowl. So this is again another problematic shape. If you come out too far and you need a good handle for your batter bowl, but if it comes out too far, it's going to be awkward to use. So there's a couple of different things you can do. One would be to attach the handle upside down, to attach it here and have it come out and around this way. And that might be a solution. Another would be to put a type of a strap handle that you would grasp in this way. You could put you can use this type of strap handle, like so. It could go, and that wouldn't be too bad like that. So probably that's about the best solution for this piece. Because I think if we come off from here, for example, it might be a little more difficult to control in that way. So let's just, so this is, I'm going to just use my towel here to support it. And now I want to make sure to locate my handle directly opposite of the spout. This is probably just a little bit too small for that piece. So I'm going to put a larger one that's a little bit wider. So when I start my pull, I'm using my hand like this, and I'm squeezing that clay with my thumb, with my fingers here all the way across the flat, just to get it started. And I'll do that on each side, and then taper it in this direction, using the thumb and the finger again like that.
How much pressure are you putting on it, Patrick? Like when you're pulling like that? I kept breaking them, so. I mean,
Okay, so that's something that takes practice to get a feel for it. So I am squeezing it like you would hold a banana. Maybe if you were trying to check your banana to see what keeps off, that kind of pressure. Not too much pressure, but enough to feel the clay. And so the thing is to gradually move and to keep your, as I'm coming down, the force I'm applying stays constant, and my fingers are moving closer together to taper that piece, if that makes sense. So as I'm coming down, I'm squeezing and keeping that taper. So it's got to be steady, your motion, and firm, not jerky. You want steady, clean motion, and that's going to keep your handle nice and even.
Okay, Patrick.
Yes.
How do you keep it from twisting? That's like when you're pulling, it always seems to turn or twist, not come straight down. Is that?
Okay, so the best way to avoid that is to hold your clay out at arm's length. And you might think this is harder to do. This is actually easier than doing it like this. But if you hold your clay out all the way, just out in front of you, using your straight arm, and then pull, and just concentrate on your fingers going straight down like that. So coming straight down. And that'll kind of help, because a lot of times if you're working in this way and it's close, then you might have a tendency to move your wrist from side to side, and that's going to kind of twist it. So that might help you just to try to keep it at your arm straight. And if you keep it, up high, it's a little easier than if it's out in front of you. Just working in that way. And also, then when you flip the clay and pull on each side, that will help to avoid those types of things too. My handles have a tendency to be thicker on one side than the other. And so that's why I keep flipping it, because I want it to be even on each side. And so that helps with that. All right, so now I've got my tapered handle. So I'm gonna lay that down on the table and see what I'm doing here. And then I'm gonna cut it at an angle with my knife here, just like that. And then you can also kind of work that with your thumb a little bit if you need to. Okay. And it's ready to attach. So before you work this down, you want to check, make sure you got it in the right spot. Move it over just a little bit here. And then smooth it in. Okay, now, whenever when you're ready to attach the other end, you want to keep your nice angle there. You can use your thumb to help support it as you bend it around and tack it on there. And then you can check the alignment, make sure it's straight before you finish that. Now with this type of piece, I'm going to try to push that up a little more so that it keeps that a little closer to my center of gravity. I'm going to pull it out a little bit like that. Okay. Now, let's take a look at our casserole here. So this is kind of a lidded casserole. And for this piece, I'm going to make 2 strap handles to put on the sides. So set that aside. This is a different clay body. Get some of that here. So I've just started out. This is basically a coil that's tapered. And I'm going to start my handle from there. And again, I'm using my fingers like that to get it started. Now, a tendency with this type of form for your strap handle is you want to watch out for the side, because you don't want it to be too wide coming off the piece or too narrow that it's not useful. But what I usually see is pieces that are too large and they just kind of don't look right. They're just too wide. So you want to be aware of that as you're starting your handle. And what I do because I need two handles. So I'm going to pull one long strap and then I'll cut my handles from the same piece. And that way they should be close to the same thickness. Now notice, since this is going to be a straight strap handle, it's not tapered. So I'm not tapering it in this direction. I'm trying to keep that nice and straight. And the same here. I want my thickness from this point down to be even. So I just pull straight and try not to taper it here. And I've got this part down here, which I'm not worried about. And I'm not, because I'm going to cut my handles from this piece. So I need it to be nice and long. And then I can cut the size that I will need. Now I'm making it a little narrow. Taking the side down just a little bit. All right, I'm going to put that down on my board here. Okay, now I'm going to cut it off at the end. Okay, so I've got a nice long strap. Now I need to cut 2 handles from that. So, let's see. Oh, so here's my piece. So I want my handles to be about like, about like that. So about 3 inches, of handle. So I'm going to cut them about 4.5 inches long. That'll give me enough to attach it. And then to have, about 3 inches there to span. So I need 2 pieces that are 4.5 inches. So since this is, my handle here is probably a little bit thicker here, I'm going to just take it right out of the middle. I'll take my ruler and I'll just cut out 2 pieces here. 4.5 inches is here, and 9 inches is here. And I'll just cut those off. And now I've got my 2 handles here. You can see. Now, one thing, and you can just put them on like this, but sometimes what I'll do is just kind of pinch the ends a little bit, flare it out to make a little, place to attach it. And it depends on the piece that you're making, how that will look or not, what kind of attachment you want to have. Especially if the clay is not very soft, your handle clay, then this makes it a lot easier to get a good attachment. This clay is plenty soft. Okay. So, all right, so this is still on the bat, so I'll just use my holes on the bat as a reference. So what I'll do is I'll just take my finger, okay, and so again, the other thing is when you're making a piece like this with a lid, you want to think, that's why I left the lid on here for now. Because if I put my, you know, I don't want to get it up too high and then it interferes with the lid or it's too close to the lid. So I want to have, you know, enough space so it's not right up on the lid, but still it's useful. And sometimes I will put a line, just a decorative line, but also a guide line for the handle. But in this case, it's a little too high up, would be useful for the handle. So I just have to kind of eyeball it. So I'll take my handle like that, and then just kind of put it up against the piece, holding it by the middle and let it kind of drape down naturally. And then just kind of bend those ends down while supporting the middle, like that. Okay. And then it's ready just to, you know, attach as you like. You can either, you know, a lot of times people just press it on if you don't want to work it all down, like that. Okay. Now I'm going to remove the lid, because that's going to help me to place the other handle. And then also at this point where it joins, you can see, I don't know if you can see, there's like a little gap. So I just want to make sure that's pressed firmly. And then I'll kind of go along here and just not smooth it down, but just kind of put some pressure. So it's going to kind of stick a little bit. If you don't do that, sometimes they'll come forward as it dries in this fire. So, you know, you just want to, and you can work that down if you want, but I usually just put a little pressure just to tighten it up. All right, now for my other handle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get on the other side so that I can see the top of this handle. And I'm just going to come straight across the piece through the middle and kind of spot my place, holding with my finger. And then I'll just kind of place the handle there, like so. And then I need to check the height. So then I'll just kind of check it. I need to move it up just a hair. And that's that. And same thing here. All right. Does anybody have any questions so far about any of that we've talked?
Hey, Patrick, we have about 7 minutes.
Okay. All right, let's take one of these and put a picture handle on here, larger piece.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The non-potter has question.
Okay.
Lots of questions. But what is the advantage of pulling it off of the mug or item versus
Okay, that's a very good question. Yeah. And it's a lot subjective, but in my opinion, when you pull the handle off of the piece, it kind of fits in a little more. It gives a little nicer flow, almost like the handle is an outgrowth of the piece and not just an applied, you know, something that's stuck on the side. I always use the handles as functional and not as an embellishment for the most part, with the exception of being like a large vase where you might put some small handles on there as an embellishment. They're not actually meant to be used. But I prefer for my mugs and useful pieces to have a real useful and good handle, not one that's fancy. For me, I find that, you know, a simple handle usually works best. And if you're making a more decorative piece, then of course you can be a little more expressive with the handle. If it's, you know, more not something necessarily to be used every day, but just something to think about there. So I'll make for this is a really rounded piece. So I'm going to put my pulled handle in there, like I did on the mug. And you'll notice that the thickness of the handle kind of conforms with the size of the piece. You want to kind of keep that scale together. If you have a small piece, smaller handle, large piece, larger handle. But you don't want the handle to be the focus of the work. You want the handle to do its job and to complement the form, not to distract from the form. And that takes practice, and it takes just looking and being aware of the parts of your piece, of how the neck and the foot relate, and how the widest point relates to those two and to the handle. So just being aware of how that works. And if it doesn't look right when you put it on there, your handle, and just take it off and do another one. Take the time to get one that really complements your work. Now, when I did pull the handle off the mug, of course, I picked the mug up and pulled the handle. With this pitcher, it's a little bit larger, so it may not be so practical to do that all the time. So what we'll do is we're just going to work in this way, just pulling it. It's the same thing, but it's just a little more awkward when you can't pick it up. But I'm supporting the handle with this hand as I pull from the bottom, shape it like that.
So Patrick, when you're doing this, it looks like your work is like leather hard and your handle is really soft. When I put my handles on, the problem that I have is that when I put it on and I slip it and score it, it looks great. And then once it dries, like they look like they kind of separate. They don't actually separate, but there's a crack around the edge.
Right. Okay, so that can be a problem because your handle is shrinking more sometimes than the piece, because the piece is leather hard, like you say, or maybe a little more than leather hard, and then your clay is kind of wet. So a couple things to think about with that. One is that you can let your handle stiffen a little bit before you put it on. That's an option. So it's already, it's started to shrink a little bit. It's closer to the leather hard pot. The other is to kind of add in a little bit of curve to the handle. So like you can see this for this mug. So as the handle dries, this is gonna shrink in, every part of it is gonna shrink in more, you can imagine. But with this kind of curve in there, that's gonna help to alleviate any stress that might build up at the joins. Another thing is that you can use vinegar when you make your attachment, especially for less plastic clays or less groggy clays, like the porcelain or the little loafers. And what the vinegar does is it changes the electrical charge of the clay particles, so they bond, changes it to a positive charge, I believe. Can't remember exactly, but anyway, it makes the clay particles stack up end to end instead of laying flat. And so it makes kind of a stronger bond. And so a lot of times that will help if you have that problem with the cracking around your joins, is to mix some of your dry clay. If you can get some this sanded clay and mix with some vinegar in that way to make your slip, or just make some slip with vinegar, and that'll kind of help a little bit to alleviate those things. So I'm going to go a little bit lower with this one to get a little bit more at the widest point here. Another thing is to watch for the drying. When you put your handle, you can cover it separately with some plastic wrap or a bag, and let, just to cover it a little separately, because a lot of times the handle will be softer, but then it actually dries faster than the rest of the piece. And sometimes that can cause an issue as well, because as this is drying here, it's wanting to close up this point, but the piece isn't quite coming along at the same rate. So that's a separate issue where the handle is drying faster, causing those pieces and the stress to be here at the joins. So
Sorry, Patrick, we have less
Okay.
than 1 minute, so.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like we could do another one on handles.
The handles is a lot for handles.
Yeah.
But hopefully will help everybody a little bit. Does anybody have any other quick questions?
Thank you so much. That was really helpful.
Yeah,
Welcome.
thank you.
So I wanted to do just real quick. I'm going to add a piece into so I've got my handle on the picture here. And I've made a small coil here. And I'm going to stick that in here. And this kind of gives a